There was a town in the north called Darnhelm, hemmed by black pine and brittle fog. No maps marked it anymore. The last road in had cracked in two like a split rib, and no one had fixed it, because no one truly left Darnhelm. Not without leaving part of themselves behind. When Grace Mallory arrived, it was dusk. Always dusk, the villagers said, even at noon. She came as a folklorist, here to study the orchard of St. Malluc, a place older than the town itself. The trees there bore no fruit, only bones. At least, that's what the letters said. The ones sent by her sister, Clara, who had vanished 6 months ago. Grace found the town quiet but expectant, like a stage waiting for its cue. The air stank faintly of iron and lavender. Locals watched from behind lace curtains. No one smiled. The innkeeper, an old woman with willow-white hair, handed Grace a brass key and whispered, "Room 4. You'll hear scratching at the door. Don't answer." When Grace asked about Clara, the woman only sighed and turned away. "Some roots grow backward, dear. Some stories, too." The orchard lay behind the churchyard. No fences. No signs. Just a thin path of crushed white stone. Grace went at dawn. The mist clung to her ankles like fingers. The trees began abruptly, black bark, leafless, twisted in paralyzed agony. And from every limb, bones. Thousands. Human and otherwise. Hung by sinew, tangled like wind chimes. As the breeze picked up, the orchard sang. Not melody. Just the faint, rhythmic clatter of bone against bone. Grace walked beneath them, heart drumming. Her sister had written of this place obsessively, called it holy, called it hungry. Near the center of the orchard stood a single white tree, and beneath it, a well, covered with a rusted grate. Grace stepped closer. Something moved inside. That night, Grace dreamt of roots growing through her skin. When she awoke, her feet were muddy, and something had been left on her pillow. A tooth. Not hers. Not human. In the village, no one would meet her eye. At the chapel, the priest flinched when she said Clara's name. "She was called," he whispered. "Like the rest. The orchard listens. It knows the hollow ones." "What do you mean?" But he only muttered a verse in Latin, kissed a nail, and shut the door. She found Clara's last notebook hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the inn. No dates. No margins. Only a single passage repeated over and over. "The tree doesn't grow bones. The bones grow the tree." That night, something scratched at her door. Long, slow. Deliberate. She didn't open it. But in the morning, someone, or something, had carved a message into the wood outside. "You were buried here too." At dusk, she returned to the orchard. This time, she brought rope, salt, and a lantern. She reached the white tree as the fog thickened. The grate over the well had been torn aside. Inside, a shaft of utter dark, and a ladder of ribs, slick and glistening. Without knowing why, Grace descended. Each step echoed like a forgotten breath. The bones creaked, but held. At the bottom, the tunnel opened into a chamber. Roots hung from the ceiling, writhing, and in the center stood a throne of fused femurs and jawbones. Upon it, a figure, wrapped in cloth, masked in bark, breathing, and beside her, Clara, or something wearing Clara's face, pale, empty-eyed, smiling too wide. "You finally heard it," Clara whispered. "The orchard's choir. It's been singing your name." Grace backed away, but the roots closed in. The masked figure stood, and Grace saw the truth. It wore her face beneath the bark. Grace could not scream. The roots coiled over her throat like warm vines, not choking, just silencing. The thing in the throne, the bark-faced mimic, tilted its head in perfect unison with her. A mirror made of muscle and wrought. Clara moved closer, her bare feet soundless on the wet stone. She looked as she had the day she vanished, hair damp, eyes distant, mouth trembling with some secret she could no longer keep. But her voice was not her own. "The orchard needs. It doesn't grow from dirt. It grows from memory. That's why it called you. Grace tried to speak. The roots twitched in warning. Clara touched her sister's chest. Do you remember your first fire? The one that took the barn? The one that took them? And Grace did. Suddenly. Vividly. She was 8 again. The match had slipped. The straw had caught. And the smell of burning horseflesh never left her dreams. Grace fell to her knees. The mimic stepped closer, shedding bark with each movement, revealing more of her face. A face perfectly hers. But older. Hollow-eyed. As if something had lived too long inside it. Each planted one feeds the orchard, it said in her voice. Each grief is a seed. And yours, oh, yours is ripe. It pointed to Clara. She gave us guilt. Then to Grace. But you bring fire. Grace was dragged from the chamber. Not by force, but by the rhythm of the orchard. Every bone rung like a bell tuned to her heartbeat. By the time she reached the ladder of ribs again, she was alone. No Clara. No mimic. Only a whisper in her ear. Bury yourself. Or we will do it for you. Back in the inn, she vomited black soil. The innkeeper did not react. She only handed Grace a dry cloth and said, "It starts in the marrow. You'll feel it soon." The turning. Grace began to lose time. A blink lasted an hour. She found leaves in her pockets. Root fibers behind her ears. Clara's notebook now contained new passages, written in Grace's own handwriting, though she had no memory of them. One read. Fire cleanses the root. But what of the ash? Another. To be planted is not to die. It is to remain. Desperate, Grace returned to the chapel. The priest was gone. His robes lay crumpled by the altar, covered in symbols carved in fingernail. The air smelled of milk and copper. Only one thing remained on the pulpit, a small black tooth in a glass vial. She took it. That night, she buried it under her bed. The next morning, she woke with her left hand missing. In its place, a root. Pale, veined, and warm. It moved when she told it to. She tried to flee. Tried the old road out of Darnhelm. But the trees were closer than before. And the sky no longer turned. It remained twilight, as if the sun was too afraid to rise. She found the path she had come on gone. Swallowed. Or perhaps rewritten. On the third night, she followed the singing. High, thin voices threaded the orchard. She walked between the bone trees, her hand, her root, guiding her. And there, beneath the white tree, she found the mimic again. Waiting. Clara beside it, eyes closed, humming. The mimic offered a knife made from spine. Burn or plant, it whispered. You only get one choice. As all orchards must. Grace stepped forward, the root twitching with anticipation. She looked to Clara. Still humming. Still empty. She took the knife. And carved a circle around her sister's feet. I'm not planting, she said. I'm digging you out. The orchard screamed. The mimic lunged. And the roots turned against it. The roots turned on the mimic like wolves on a traitor. They split bark, tore sinew, drank the sap that pulsed beneath her stolen skin. Grace didn't stop them. She couldn't. The orchard had shifted. It no longer served the mimic. It was listening to her now. Because she had done what no other had. She'd remembered the fire. Clara collapsed into her arms, limp but breathing. Her skin was cold as buried stone. Her lips trembled but formed no words. Grace held her tightly. She didn't cry. She couldn't afford to. Instead, she carved deeper into the ground. The circle widened. Roots withered at her touch. Her root hand burned with purpose. The orchard hissed. Not in anger, but fear. They descended. Not through the bone well this time, but through the fresh tunnel Grace had made by unearthing the old sins. For below the white tree, far beneath the orchard's twisted limbs, was a place older than Darnhelm. The true root. The first buried. It wasn't a chamber. It was a crypt without walls, a memory so large it took the shape of stone. And in the center, an altar of teeth. Atop it, a book bound in human scalp, still sprouting hair. The Orchard's Codex. Clara stirred when they approached it. Her eyes fluttered open, but what looked through them was not entirely her. It wrote the roots, she whispered. But it never meant to grow, only to contain. Grace opened the codex. Its pages were inked in grief, names, symbols, confessions burned into the parchment by memory alone. One passage read, "The orchard was planted with murder, but watered with forgiveness." Another, "The fire was not the first sin. The first sin was silence." Grace turned to the last page. Blank. Waiting. She heard footsteps behind her. But when she turned, no one was there. Only the whisper of a boy's voice. "They buried me with a song in my throat, and roots in my lungs." It was not a ghost. It was the seed. The first buried stepped from the shadows. He was small. 9, 10. His feet didn't touch the floor. His eyes were sockets filled with sap. His ribs were visible through thin parchment skin. And his mouth, stitched shut with silver thread. Grace dropped the book. The boy pointed at Clara, then at Grace, then at the codex. Clara suddenly spoke, not her voice, but a dozen at once. He was the first, the one they silenced, the one the town forgot. The orchard grew from his breath. Grace stepped forward, ignoring the scream in her blood. She knelt before him and cut the silver threads. The boy didn't speak. He screamed, not with voice, but with memory. The walls shook. Bones above cracked in the orchard canopy. Every tree trembled. His scream painted the codex's final page in fire. It read, "What was buried in silence shall be uprooted in flame." Clara collapsed again, but this time Grace caught her with one arm. The other, her root hand, plunged into the altar of teeth. It accepted her, welcomed her. The orchard above wailed as the fire spread. Not heat, but remembrance. Roots caught flame. Bones burned with red light. Voices long dead sang a funeral dirge in reverse. The orchard ungrew. As the crypt cracked apart, Grace and Clara climbed, carrying the codex between them. The white tree was already ash. The well sealed itself with smoke. And when they crossed the chapel threshold again, the priest's robes were gone. In his place, a single iron seed. Grace buried it beside the church, watered it with a drop of blood, and whispered the boy's name, newly remembered. John. The earth shivered, but did not resist. For the first time since her arrival, Grace looked west. The road had returned, whole, clean, and sunlight, golden and ordinary, bled through the mist. She took Clara's hand. The orchard no longer sang, and behind them, Darnhelm forgot itself. They walked for miles before the road became real. Behind them, the mist swallowed Darnhelm in a final breath. Clara said nothing, still half asleep inside herself, her fingers twitching at unseen melodies. The codex pulsed against Grace's back with every step, as though it had its own heartbeat. Each night, Grace dreamed in sap and flame. The orchard, though burned, still echoed in her veins. She felt the root within her, the one that had become her hand, reaching downward even when she stood still. They reached the edge of a different town. New, modern. Street lamps hummed. No one looked twice at them. Clara was given tea. A doctor checked her eyes. But Grace didn't stay long. The codex wasn't done with her. She rented a room in a cold brick house overlooking a field of corn. For 3 nights she didn't sleep. The codex lay unopened on the table, but she felt it whispering through the grain in the wallpaper. Every surface around her began to stain with damp root prints. Even in the city, the orchard remembered. On the 4th night, Clara knocked on the door. She looked better. Not healed, but present. "It's not finished, is it?" she asked. Grace nodded. The Codex wants a final memory. One that can't be forgotten. Clara's face tightened. Me. They went to the edge of the forest near the city's limits. It wasn't like Darnhelm, no bone trees or ash roots. Just common birch and oak. The air didn't taste of iron. Still, Grace knelt and opened the Codex one last time. There were no pages now. Only a mirror. It showed her a vision. A new orchard. But it didn't feed on pain. It fed on memory freely given. Children laughing, elders whispering stories, lovers planting bones of their dead not to bind, but to honor. The trees bore fruit that whispered names, not secrets. She closed the Codex. Clara took it from her. "It should be you," Grace said. "No," Clara replied. "I was planted once. You unburied me. Now you remember what they tried to erase." She placed the Codex into the soil, and whispered her final memory. "I was loved once. I forgot it. But I remember now." The earth sighed. Roots spiraled, soft and warm. No screams. Only the hush of return. Clara smiled, and disappeared, not into death, but into memory. The first tree of the new orchard rose in her place. Pale, gentle, bore a single apple. Grace took the apple, bit into it. Inside, a single iron seed. She placed it under her tongue. And for the first time since childhood, she slept. 10 years later. The orchard stands outside a city now. People come from far away to walk among the trees. They do not scream. They do not bind. They sing. And in the heart of the orchard, there is a white bench. Upon it sits a woman with a root for a hand, reading from a book no one else can see. Children ask her if the stories are true. She only smiles and says, "The tree doesn't grow bones anymore. Now, it grows reminders."